Hello, everybody, and welcome to Crafty. My name is Alexander Jeffrey. I'm one of the co founders. At Crafty, we show short films that are heart driven, feel good stories from all around the world documentaries, short films, animation, everything alike. The only thing that combines them is that they have an emphasis on heart. Today, I'm sitting down with Jake Hull, who is the director of Second Words, which just premiered on Crafty this week. I asked him questions about the making of this movie and about filmmaking in general. So here you go. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Jake, welcome to Crafty.
Well, thank you for having me, Alex.
Of course, man. It's really exciting to be able to show your film, which is a few years old at this point, but beautiful nonetheless, and
Thank you.
really an awesome piece. And I'm super excited to see how our audience reacts to it.
Me too. I was going back through some of the old festival submissions and emails and things that we had done for the film, and it sort of reminded me just how excited and invested I was in this film, especially when we were making it and in the post production and when we were going out to festivals. So it really was totally consuming in my life for about a year and 2 years.
Yeah, and I want to talk about the sort of inspiration for the movie because, just having a little bit of insider knowledge about this project, I know that you worked with a writer to develop the screenplay. So talk about sort of that initial gem of an idea and then also what it was like to work with a different writer to bring the script to life.
Absolutely. So prior to this script, I had done a lot of my own writing, and I had met Samuel Lasky through the Omaha Film Festival, through the festival circuit, and he's a wonderful writer, and he had wrote a screenplay that I had called The Crib that I had turned into a short. And so he and I wanted to collaborate on another script, and I was trying really hard to find a storyline that I thought I could wrap up some of my feelings and emotions that I had for my own grandparents. I was dealing with the loss of a grandparent at the time, and I was also dealing with some knowledge about my grandfather that was kind of shocking to me. It wasn't necessarily that it. So you don't generally like hear rumors about your own grandparents. It's not a common thing. And I had heard rumors that I don't know whether they're true or untrue, and I won't exactly go into those details just because of
Sure.
family members being involved. But it was a scenario where I was like, wow, this is very charging, very emotional, and I wanted to figure out a way to get it to paper. Sam and I worked on this script and tried to create a device for memory, which is meatloaf, and the food that your loved one prepared for you, and the memories associated with those things. So then we decided to take that device and then plug it into a script, and we came up with what we have here.
Yeah, and the original title of Second Words was Meatloaf at one
That was
point.
the joke working title. I
Yeah,
don't want to
yeah.
say it's not a joke, but the thing was is we always said with how emotional the script was, it just
Yeah.
didn't make sense to call it meatloaf. We couldn't figure out exactly what we wanted to do. But yeah, the whole time during production, everybody just called it meatloaf. And the whole time we kept saying we got to come up with a better name for this. This is not this is not a good name for this script. But Meatloaf stuck until Sam wrote that line. That's Sam's line
Hmm.
in the film. And again, I don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen it quite yet. But there's a very emotional line tied to the the title of the film.
Yeah, no, it's a great title, and I kind of want to dive deeper into this because I think in the short film world specifically, it's so often that you see that there's the writer director, like somebody who writes and directs their own work, and I see you as more of like a traditional filmmaker in the sense of you being a very open collaborator and working with other people to bring your vision to life. So What was that sort of initial prompt that you gave Sam in terms of writing the first draft?
Uh, as a collaborator, I really wanted to provide him with a lot of freedom. Uh, as I would like, I will always tell people that as the director, I usually considered myself the least talented person on set. I literally would just go and get people far more talented and skilled in their roles. So Sam is an incredible writer, so I made sure I got him on board, and then Joel Froome and everybody that worked on that film. They were all far more talented than me, and I was just the guy who decided to bring them all together. And when it comes to the script and the prompt for Sam, I gave him the backstory of my grandfather and my grandmother, and I said I wanted to do a story about loss, that is coping with loss. And that was sort of it. I mean, we talked on the phone a lot in regards to memories that I had of my grandmother, and those sort of things, memories of my grandfather. And he probed a lot in terms of like how deep we wanted to go into the reality of it, the truth of it, the truth of my feelings, and then where we wanted to draw that line of, okay, this is fictional. And I will say that it's like 95% fictional in this script. Sam did such a good job of really just taking my emotions and my feelings and turning it into a story.
So you didn't necessarily come to him with a fully formed idea. It was just, hey, we've worked together before. He liked the work that you'd done on the crib, which is now
Yep.
called A Game on the Line, and he said, I'm willing to write sort of whatever you have next.
Yeah, we had been collaborating on multiple scripts. Some were feature length. And so at that time, we were really interested in sort of feeling out not just the process of writing screenplays together, where he is the writer, I am the director, giving him my thoughts and desires that I'd want in the script, but also in the collaboration in the production of a script we had worked on together. So it really was this testing ground all the way through. And so I brought Sam the emotions and the basic structure, right? I knew some of the characters I wanted in it, as far as the protagonist. But yes, it was not a full-fledged story. And then he brought me, I think, went through 8 or 9 different drafts, and the first few were immediately out the window. He did not, he wasn't like really attached to anything. He would be like, hey, here's a tester, see how this feels out. At one point in the script, I had a very strong memory with regards to my grandmother always had these towels that had the day of the week on them, and she had them in her kitchen. They would hang over her stove, and she would change those out every day. And I remember bringing to Sam, I was just like, these towels have to be in the script. They have to be in it. I really want these towels. And I remember I originally wanted the script title to be It's Still Wednesday, right? I wanted this title because when the character passed away, I wanted the towel to never change, right?
Oh,
Because
that's cool.
my grandmother always changed the towel out. Well, that was a part of the first few, like I hung on so tightly to trying to keep this in it, and it just didn't end up working. Like it's still, that is part of the reality that was removed from the script, that I still have those fond memories, would have loved to have had it in there, but when we were working through the storyline and trying to make sure that we hit the points that we wanted, it just didn't fit. So,
Yeah, sure.
I don't know if I answered your question anymore. I
No,
went off on a tangent.
you did. No, that was great. Actually, a piece of the story that I didn't even know. That's pretty cool. So I kind of want to move on from the writing and talk a little bit more about the production. So talk to me about the farmhouse, and it being such a character in the movie, having so much texture as a location. How did you find that, and how did it end up working from a production standpoint?
Well, I am very fortunate that the farmhouse is my uncle's. So I knew when we were writing the script that it was for this farmhouse. And I would send pictures to Sam, and I would say, I already know where the backdrop, and I talked to my uncle. He lives alone, and he is very, very supportive of myself and filmmaking, and he was very interested anyway. So I told him I wanted to shoot a short film at his house, and I mean, I told him like months in advance, and you would have thought that I was trying to do it the next day. He was like, "What do you need? When do I need to do it?" And he was all for it. He's my uncle. His name is Bubba. It's not his real name. That's just his nickname that everybody calls him. There are people who don't actually know his real name because they just call him Bubba, which is pretty funny. And so I had worked with my uncle to make sure that it was going to work out, timelines and dates and everything like that. But yeah, that's why it feels so connected to the story, and a part of the story is I knew the whole time we were shooting there. So Sam knew the whole time we were shooting there. We were writing the script almost based around the location. We knew the rooms we wanted to use. We knew the spaces before. So it was sort of in reverse order from what you would normally do, where you'd write the script and then you find the location that fits.
That's it's such a luxury for production. Like there's often times where I'll be writing something and I'll picture a house that I used to live in, or that kind of thing for like the layout of the environment.
Yeah.
And then of course you're never going to find that exact thing when you're location scouting. So it's so nice to be able to work in reverse and know exactly where you're shooting. So John Beasley is like, he's obviously a very recognizable face and name, and an amazing actor. Some of my favorite appearances, of course, are like the Mighty Ducks and his brief role in The Mandalorian, which I'm a huge Star Wars nerd and a huge fan of that show. So talk to me about how he came to be involved in the project, and then just like, just watching him on set and working with him as a director, what that was like. Because, I mean, having this kind of talent in a short film is also a huge luxury, and it really shows in the final product.
Well, first of all, thank you. And yes, John is incredibly talented. So let's start with exactly how he got involved in the project. So I worked very closely with Dana Altman. He's a good friend of mine and a mentor of mine. He's a producer out of Omaha, Nebraska, has produced multiple very, very good films, and he's just a very talented storyteller. So Dana and I were sort of workshopping the script a little bit. He was very hands-on in terms of helping me work through that, workshop it, and when he asked me, well, who are you thinking for this lead character? And I said, honestly, I'd really like John Beasley. John Beasley is an Omaha-based actor, and the role was appropriate in age, and it was very fitting. And if you don't have to fly anybody in, and if you don't have to go through the long casting trials, then it was perfect for me. And so he said, yeah, I know John. I can give him a call right now. Like, we were sitting on his couch, on Dana's couch in his office, and he's like, I'll give him a call right now. I was like, seriously? So he calls John. He's like, hey, I got a filmmaker here who's got a short script. It's pretty good. You might want to look at it. And John said, sure, just send it over. And so Dana just emailed it to John Beasley, and about a week later, John and I were sitting in a room just having a chat about the screenplay. And he liked it a lot, and we talked about the story behind it, like how it came to be, some of the stuff you and I have already talked about. And in the end, he said he would do the role. He did ask if I had anybody in mind for the lead female role, and I said, John, I haven't cast that role yet. I wanted to talk to you about it to see if you had any thoughts. And he immediately said, I know exactly who you want. And John was instrumental in finding Tammy Ray, who was incredible, just kind of mind-blowing. She was a student of John's, actually. John has a theater in Omaha where he teaches lots of actors from around the world. And so she was a student of his, and he said, I think she would be just phenomenal in this role. And I had her come in, and they read lines together, and it was one of the most emotional. They read the lines from one of the most emotional scenes in the script, and man, they read the lines. I gave a couple of notes, and then they went through it again, and it was just damn near brought you to tears. And so that's when I knew, one, the casting was perfect, and then two, that emotion really, their connection. They While he was a mentor to her, there was enough of a almost father-daughter relationship already there, already inherent in their relationship, that it transitioned to the screen perfectly. So when you can find that, and when you have these actors who know one another and have chemistry already pre-built, to be honest, like I said, I was the least talented person in the room. All I did was go and find extremely talented people to do what they do best. So that was kind of how it came together on that.
I don't remember who said it, but somebody said directing is like 80%, 90% casting. So you definitely knocked that out of the park.
Thank you.
So I kind of know a little bit about the history of this movie just because we're friends and we know each other. But most people think of Nebraska as like the flyover state, and those of us who have lived in Nebraska, think of Omaha and Lincoln as like pretty big cities. But you're shooting not in Omaha and Lincoln. You're shooting in a very small rural part of Nebraska. So, what kind of challenges did that bring? Like, you've got to, obviously, like you said, John is local to Omaha, so he didn't have to fly him in and put him up in a hotel. But what other challenges does shooting in rural Nebraska bring that, most filmmakers who are shooting in sort of the bigger markets, Austin, LA, New York, whatever, that they don't necessarily have to face?
Yeah, so the interesting thing about shooting in Nebraska, and whether you're shooting in Lincoln or Omaha, there are going to be inherent challenges to the whole state. Now, Lincoln and Omaha, I would consider reasonably sized cities that have resources for you. Hotels, they have airports, they have the things that you need, the tools, right? The lights, the cameras, they have all of the equipment you would need in those cities. But I was shooting, we were roughly about 35 minutes outside of Omaha, but depending on where you were coming from, John Beasley's commute every day to set was closer to like 45 minutes to an hour, depending on traffic. So not the closest commute, and always a challenge at that, but getting crew to the location and then bringing food to the location, and making sure that the set was the lighting and everything. So there's always trucking everything to the location. That's a big challenge. Other than that, the site we had, it had the electricity, it had the amenities that we would need for restrooms and things like that. There was a full kitchen,
Sure.
of course. So none of those were all that challenging. But the crew, so Joel Froome was the cinematographer or director of photography on this, and he flew in from New York, Buffalo, New York. I think he was in Buffalo at that time, or he might have still been in New York City. I'm not 100% sure anymore. But so he'd flown in, and I believe, let's see, Mark O'Brien was a producer on it, and he had flown in from LA. And I think those were and we did fly Sam out. So that was a luxury, right? Sam, the writer, did not need to be on set, but Sam and I were good friends. And once again, I said, this was sort of this, we wanted this trial. We wanted this, see what it feels like to produce a movie beginning to end, where he's the writer, I'm the director. We were trying to collaborate, and I wanted him on set, which he was great to have because we workshopped some lines with John on set. Sam was right there with us to have those conversations. Otherwise, we didn't fly anybody else in. I believe we, tried to use as much local crew and talent as we could. So I honestly can say whether you're shooting a movie in a major city or whether you're shooting a movie in the middle of nowhere, the logistics are all the same. The distance for those logistics just might be different. But you might be,
Sure.
getting a lighting truck. I mean, if you're in LA, it might take your grip truck 2 hours to get to set just because of traffic. So
Totally.
whether it's so I would say is the process still remains the same. The challenges are simply making sure you have all the gear and equipment. I guess the lenses were a bit of a shipment as well for the project.
You had to get
So
the
we had
lenses.
to, we
the
had to
lenses
get
shipped
the
in.
lenses from out of state, but the camera and everything we got in state. Actually, it was
Yeah,
your camera.
nice. Well, it was my camera for the first part of the shoot, and then my camera started
Yes.
behaving weird, and you got the other one in state.
Yes, yeah.
But so and like we talked about sort of some of the challenges of shooting in a rural place, but the trade-off is like you were talking about with your uncle, like not only is the location free and it's a beautiful location, but it's like what else can I do for you? Like how can I help? Like there's that sort of Midwestern
yeah.
and Southern mentality of, hey, like come into my home, I'll cook you dinner, like it'll be easy.
Yes, that was the best part. Like that, we had the hospitality not just of my uncle, but lots of family in the area, lots of people willing to help out or be a part of whatever we needed. And that was, I mean, literally down to the wardrobe. John Beasley's wardrobe was an actual farmer's wardrobe from who lived across the road from my uncle, which is why
awesome.
which is why it looked so authentic, because it was.
Because it was, yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Okay, so what would you say was the most challenging scene to film?
For me personally, the most challenging scene to film would have been it's the scene where they confront one another for the first time in the film. She drives up to John's house, or to our protagonist's house, and he kicks open the door and he was like, "What the hell are you doing here? I don't want you on my land." He's trying to, old man, get off my property kind of crankiness. And she just wants questions answered. And this was difficult for me on a number of levels. One, because we found out that we actually shot this scene. This was the one that we shot with your Red Scarlet. And it was sort of giving us some fits. We had some like pink pixels on it.
Yeah.
So there was the stress of the camera scenario on set, like physically stressing out about like, is this camera gonna make it through the scene? Then there was the stress of handling this big first moment in the script and how we wanted to play that with John coming in with a hot temper, like this old man, get off my lawn, and her wanting to demand answers. And these two kind of stone walls coming together, and how do you portray that in a way that doesn't make either of them the bad guy? Because the whole point is they each have these emotions that are driving what they're doing. And as the audience, you don't know what those emotions are really tied to. But I didn't want either one of them to be the bad guy or the villain or nobody's wrong here. Everybody is emotionally distraught and everybody is dealing with loss in their own way. And that was, for me, one of the most challenging emotionally and then just physically on set, trying to deal with the hiccups that come with independent filmmaking.
Yeah, basically, don't borrow a camera from Alex. That's the message baked in.
It wasn't your fault. I didn't even want to bring that up until you did. I wasn't going to. It really was. It was just something that happens when it comes to filmmaking, and you should always have those backups. Which we were lucky enough to have a backup that we were able to get the very next day.
Amazing. So I kind of want to veer away from second words for a minute and just ask some generic sort of filmmaking questions.
Sure.
So the first one is, if you could have, this one's sort of related to Second Words. So like if you could have a time machine and go back to the production of Second Words and do one thing different. It's a beautiful film. It turned out amazing in my opinion. But if you could go back and just fix one element, what would that be?
Mm. I it's so hard to contemplate. I try so hard to tell myself like this is what I got in the can, this is what I'm working with. I guess I would say I would want to get more of Tammy Ray's emotional reactions. We did our best when we were on set trying to convey her emotions, and I still feel like I could have done more because she, as an actress, gave so much. It was all on set, and I still look back and think that I missed some shots of her. I missed some reaction shots of her, and like when she was reading lines for John, right? Cameras on John. We should have had a camera turned on her as well. Like we should have had two of them, just because of how well she was reading those lines for John, or giving him something to react to. She was on point all the time, and I think I'd give her credit for that. And I think while I'm not disappointed with how we represented her on the film, I feel like she gave even more than we depicted.
We're able to capture, yeah. Well, that's one of the like really cool things about independent film too, is that it's a lot more like theater in the sense that the actors are giving and are generous. Like sometimes on those big Marvel shows, the two actors in the scene together aren't even there on the same day doing their scene. So it's like to be able to have that sort of like intimacy and to be able to do the takes and all that. I think we all wish we could do more takes and have more time and all that kind of stuff. But no, that's a really good answer. So I guess specifically focusing in on short films, because I think features are a totally different ballgame, but what advice would you give to young filmmakers or, those film students who are about to graduate and get into the industry, people who are starting their career and wanting to do, what you do?
Well, coming from like this is pot calling the kettle black scenario here. So take it with a grain of salt, but I would preach patience. That's the one thing I never had. I came right out of college and jumped right into literally making the week I graduated was the week I started shooting my first feature-length film. We financed it myself for $5,000, and we shot for 10 days straight. We averaged about 15 to 16 hours every day on set. It was an absolute nightmare. It was the most fun nightmare I've ever had. And the film will never be seen or shown anywhere. But the thing was, it wasn't that was a bad experience, but the patience that I learned along the way, and not just in that film, but it took years, really helped me to figure out what I wanted to do for pre-production, how the process. Learning the process of your process for filmmaking. And everybody's is going to be a little bit different. But learning your process for filmmaking, yes, is about doing, but is also slightly a matter of patience. And I know most filmmaking is like hurry up and wait. We gave that script to John Beasley, and that 1 week that it took him to read it and get back to us sort of thing was the longest week in the history of my life. Right? Because all I wanted was John to like the script and to tell me he would be in it. And every day I woke up, did I get the answer yet? Check my email, no. And so the patience, right? Like patience is in every moment, understanding that there's other steps that you can be doing and that there are, moments that are going to go past. Like John could have said no. It didn't mean that the film wasn't going to happen. Now, in this case, of course, I was lucky enough that John said yes, and those fortunate moments will happen. It's learning that patience and making sure you're doing it right.
Yeah, no, that's great advice, and I also think of you as like a very patient filmmaker in the sense that you not only take time with the projects that you're working on to do that, to go through that process and make sure you're kind of going through each step the way that feels right to you, but you're also patient with what stories you decide to tell and to make. Whereas like, I know some filmmakers and myself included, it's like you get an idea, you're shooting it the next week just because you're, kind of sporadic. But I totally respect the sort of like really sitting with an idea and knowing like, okay, this is important to me and I'm willing to take the time to do this particular story right. And so I think that, patience kind of goes twofold with you in the sense that you're not only patient with the process, but you're patient with the projects as well.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. Some of it is definitely patience. Some of it is a kind of ADD need for things to be aligned in my preference. Like I like to get things the way I want them, which sounds really, I don't know, assholey. But effectively, like Joel Froome shooting this film, nobody else was going to shoot this film. I was going to wait if Joel couldn't shoot the film. It was his to shoot, and I was going to make sure that we did. So if it was going to cost more money to fly him in, which it did, if it's going to cost more money to wait or to get the camera that he and I agree we both want, that was the thing. So some of the way that I just lost my desire to just pick up and make, like just that instant, that knee-jerk reaction, which I love people's ability to do that, right? The way that you and Paul, I loved the what you did over the pandemic with the
double date night.
Yeah, double date night, and then you did the Christmas one.
Yeah,
I loved those. And you guys were just, listen, we're hungry filmmakers. We got to do something. And the way that you just solicited scripts and then just made the best, like that whole process was so much fun. But you did that in a matter of how long? I mean, that whole movie took what, 6 months total? Not even?
Oh, yeah, less, yeah.
I mean,
probably closer to 2 or 3 months.
I was beginning the competition of the screenwriting all the way to the maybe it was even shorter. So that is such a talent. For me, it's more like I have to stew on things. Like I have to hate something and then fall back in love with it before I'm able to make it. And that's just I guess that's just the way I have to do it.
Well, it's your process, and that's like you said, there's no one right process for anybody. But I think for young filmmakers, like going back to your advice, it's finding your process, finding what works for you, and that's awesome. So my last question for you is, this isn't a favorite film question because I hate that question, like what your favorite film is. I can't stand that question because for me it changes.
Pick a genre. Yeah, pick a genre. That's what I always tell, and they're like, no, you have to have a favorite. No, I don't. I don't have to have a favorite.
You don't have to have a favorite. So the question isn't what your favorite film is. The question is, what film or films do you find yourself going back and watching the most often?
Okay, that's fair. I can answer this fairly easily because we all have mobile phones and smartphones with the ability to watch movies and things like that. But for a very long time, before I streamed everything and Netflix on your phone kind of thing, on Apple iTunes, you could buy a movie. And I've only ever owned one movie that I had on my phone downloaded to where I would just, I got 15 minutes to sit here and wait in this doctor's office. I guess I'm turning that movie on. Or I'm on a plane and, I've listened to whatever, all the music I decided I wanted to listen to at that moment. I'll turn this movie on. And it's always the same movie. It's the only one I ever bought and kept always downloaded. It's still on my phone right now. And that is The Social Network.
No way.
I will turn that movie on just to hear the dialogue, just to hear the beats. I love the trajectory of the characters and their relationships, and I genuinely like the ending and how it's not a true ending, right? Like, these relationships aren't over, and the reality of the situation is, like, Zuckerberg and all of these are real humans, and I get to connect the story from that film into reality. I get to say, this is where they were, this is where they've gone, and I can make those storylines connect in my head. So I like everything about it. And so it's, and then of course, David Fincher's directing is, especially in that film, it's, for me, such a treat to the transitions that he does, all the blocking. I love the blocking in that film because there's so much talking, and yet the script and the movie paces so well. It's flawless in my opinion.
Well, the reason I reacted the way I did is because that is also my most watched movie. It's the movie that I'm not going to put it as my favorite movie of all time, but it's the movie that I've certainly watched the most. I own the Blu-ray. I also have it downloaded, and so I've definitely gone back to that one, especially around like the fall, because there's something about that like Harvard fall, like people wearing sweaters, just the kind of coziness of that movie. I've watched it over and over and over again. And like you were talking about the ending, I love the sort of that he's built this empire and he's sitting there refreshing his friend request on the girl that he talked to at the bar at the beginning, and just that loneliness, and there's something so poignant in that visual to me. But yeah, that's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's definitely a favorite. I would also say that movie to me is the perfect transition movie. And I don't mean it is, I love the transitions within the film, but that movie, can bridge between any genre. So, like, you can watch that movie and it has some really, really dark visual elements where the very next movie you watch could be a horror movie and you'll be like, oh my God, I can see the I can see how, one goes to the other. Like, a horror film director could watch The Social Network and take cues if they wanted to. They're there.
Yeah.
The visual cues. But again, you could turn that into a comedy. You can take cues from that film for anything because all of it is just, at this point, standard, right? Like the process, scene to scene, like it's incredible. The comedy involved in the dialogue of that movie, I laugh all the time. Yeah. It remains funny. So it's also possible that it is just a part of our age or demographic, right? Like, you and I come up at the same time. Like, that film was just when I got out of school. You were still in school at the time, in film school. And so maybe it just represents that moment in history for us.
Yeah, and I think there was like an element of surprise with that movie too, because I remember the comingsoon.net article, because that's where I used to get all my movie news, was comingsoon.net. And they announced that David Fincher was making a movie about Facebook. And I remember everybody around me was like, this is weird. Like, he's lost
it was like,
rocker.
This is premature. Yeah. Like, we're already doing, this. We haven't even done,
Facebook had just become popular. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, because that was, like, I got on Facebook in 2005. You had to have a college email address at the time to get on Facebook. So as soon as I graduated high school and got my Lincoln email address, I was able to sign up. And it was like a few years later the movie was coming out. And I do remember, like, everybody was like, this, not only is it weird that David Fincher is doing this movie, but yeah, like you said, it feels very soon to do it. But seeing it in the theater, you're just going like, this is an immediate classic. It's a masterpiece.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say about that is when I am working, whether it's writing screenplay or just working on whatever I do, I will put the soundtrack to that movie on in the background, and it's, I don't know, it's like muse fuel, right? It just helps my brain go. And I can even not be, it's just in the background and it just goes. It's a perfect score.
Yeah. And that movie really, it gave us, Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross doing a film score, I think for the first time. And the scores that they've done since have just been magnificent as well.
Yeah, they really know how to hit the emotions just right on the head, in a strange new way, right? Like
Yeah,
when I first heard that score, I was like, I've never heard anything like this. And
yeah, totally.
still, I mean, there are people that are doing that, but at that time, that was one of the real charging forces behind why I liked it.
Completely. Awesome. Well, this has been a really fun conversation. Thank you so much for
Yeah, thank
sharing
you.
second words with our audience. And,
Oh, thanks for
maybe we'll,
watching. Thanks
maybe,
for Go ahead.
no, yeah. I was just gonna say maybe we'll bring you back, in a few months down the road, as we've built up sort of the viewership and do a live Q&A so people can ask you questions that they might have.
That'd be incredible, especially for this film came out a few years ago, and it's been one that's been close to my heart the whole time. So if there are people that certainly watch it, love it, like it, I'd love for them to reach out. But of course, just being on Crafty is kind of an honor. So thank you very much.
What's next for you?
I knew you were going to ask that. I am not entirely sure. I would really like to probably shoot another short. I've got a few like stories and things that I want to talk about or that I would like to do. I've grown a lot over the last few years, both dealing with loss, dealing with career, dealing with children, and those are all. I don't know how I'm going to talk about them all, but I'd love to do something.
Amazing. Well, thank you again, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, thanks.